Broken and alone, she whispered amazing truths. He discovered strength in her pain. Transforma. As Sarah scrubbed down the greasy counter of the diner, a familiar weight pressed on her chest, each streak of foam reminding her of her mother, as unfulfilled dreams snaking around her heart like a constrictor. The whispers of her mother's battles with addiction haunted her still, making her nights long and filled with a suffocating silence. She was exhausted physically and emotionally, hoarding moments of comfort amidst the chaos, trying to shield her children from the shadows of a legacy she never wanted. The bell on the door chimed, and Ethan walked in, a beacon of sunlight fitting awkwardly in her dim world. As he ordered coffee, she felt a spark of something. Was it hope? She backed away from the surge of connection, fearing it could penetrate the fragile walls she had built. What if he knew her story? What if he could see the broken pieces of a life held precariously together with poetry written on the backs of old receipts? Busy day? He asked, drawing her attention back to him while filling her with the urge to be more than just a waitress. You seem deep in thought. She hesitated, wondering if truth could ever slip through her lips. Just keeping my head above water. The vulnerability tasted bitter. All she wanted was a genuine connection, yet the fear of judgment loomed larger than her dreams. What do you dream of outside of work? He inquired, fostering an intimacy that felt dangerous. It was a question she rarely allowed herself to ponder, a reflection of dreams that had turned to dust under reality's weight. A quiet ache blossomed in her chest. She yearned for belonging, to be seen, to be known beyond her struggles. But could she ever risk revealing the raw edges of her past? She wiped her hands aggressively on a dish rag, fighting back the uprising panic. She was slowly losing the ability to maintain the facade. It was like grasping on a sand slipping through her fingers. It was tempting to share her poems, the way they expressed her frustrations caged within her soul. But every line was a naked truth, potentially bearing her to dismissal. As the once comforting diner began to buzz with patrons, a sense of urgency overwhelmed her. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. She turned back to Ethan, and the moment hung thick with her entangled emotions. What if he learned about her mother's addiction? Would it shatter the fragile bond they were forging? He offered her a soft smile. Did he sense her unease? Each second was an eternity as she fought with effort, barely breathing, her heart racing with the fear of rejection tearing her thoughts in half. Sarah's voice trailed off, filled with unspoken questions. Outside, a storm brewed, and the winds howled like the demons of her past, forcing her walls to tremble. She wanted to expose her vulnerabilities, to let him in, but the weight of history loomed large, casting its shadow as they stood on the precipice of a decision that could either pull them together or push them apart. Twists of dread and determination pulsed through her, and in that charged silence, everything felt irrevocably about to change. Ethan cleared his throat, a hesitant sound that reverberated through the air, puncturing the heavy silence. You can tell me to back off if I'm prying, he said gently. I see something in you, Sarah. A depth. Those words, laced with sincerity, crept inside her defenses, prying a bit at the walls she had so carefully constructed. Depth. She had long lost sight of that within herself, overshadowed by the fatigue of daily battles, the repetitive cycle of worry and self-doubt. But there was a glint of curiosity ignited by his encouragement. If he could see her as something more than her past, perhaps she could, too. Her heart raced, a chaotic symphony of hope and fear. What do you see? It slipped out before she had a chance to consider the potential harm. The anticipation hung heavy, catching inside her throat as she waited, solidifying her vulnerability in this unexpected moment. Ethan met her gaze, unflinching. Someone strong, he replied simply. Someone capable of so much more than she realizes. Those words reverberated through her mind like a mantra, though they left a bitter aftertaste. Strong? How could he possibly see strength in the shell of a woman who is often drowning in self-reproach, tethered to painful memories? But in that moment, something flickered within her, a notion she had buried deep under layers of compounded burdens. Could strength be a part of her narrative? As she moved to wipe another table, she felt the familiar cramp return to her hands, a reminder of her continuous fight. The sudden realization hit her like a jolt. Why was she constantly striving to repress her dreams? A shame-driven chain of thoughts surfaced, and she caught herself wondering if she had turned ordinary defeats into a perpetual cycle of suffering that further sealed her fate. I write, she blurted, poems about pain, loss, moments that matter. She was surprised by the admission, leaving her lips like a bubbling spring searching for the surface. His interest piqued. Ethan leaned a little closer. Wow, I would love to read them sometime. The flame of embarrassment bloomed in her cheeks. I'm not sure they're good enough. Who decides what is good enough? Ethan asked, a challenge cloaked in encouragement. Why do we feel the need to filter our truths? The wings of courage began to unfurl within her. The suffocating doubts faded momentarily, replaced by a burgeoning desire to dig deeper into the roots of her artistic expression. Perhaps sharing her writings would not just expose vulnerability. Perhaps it could lead to healing, an act of reclamation that she had denied for far too long. Yet, a wavering shadow crept back in. What would she reveal? The fear of ridicule clawed at her edges as she stood there, suspended between the urge to share and the instinct to conceal her truths. The diner buzzed with liveliness around them, as she felt paradoxically encased in a bubble of intimacy with this man who dared to see her differently. I'll think about it, she finally replied, her voice barely above a whisper. The storm outside unleashed heavy droplets, bouncing off the window. Their cacophony enveloped them, emphasizing the intimate quiet that loomed within. Good, he smiled softly, the corners of his eyes crinkling. I think it could be liberating. But as she stood amidst the chatter and warmth of the diner, wrestling with the weight of her thoughts, dread settled back in. Each word she spoke seemed to tighten the grip of her past, ready to unleash its hold. What if revealing her poetry meant unveiling the demons she had long kept at bay? As she caught a glimpse of Ethan's supportive smile, she understood that taking a step forward required more than just sharing words. It demanded she confront the fear and shame that had governed her life for too long. With a brewing storm both outside and within, she sensed the approach of a pivotal decision, one that could shake the ground beneath her complacent world. And in that charged air, she heard a whisper of resolve. Maybe it was finally time to face her shadows. The moment had come to unravel her fears or let them consume her once again. What awaited her if she chose to embrace her words, her truths? Would different doors swing open, or would she remain locked in a past that no longer defined her? Sitting in the cozy diner, surrounded by the warmth of bustling patrons, Sarah felt an electrifying shift within her. The soft murmur of conversations blended into an ambient backdrop, while her own thoughts danced between possibilities and uncertainties. Would this evening mark the transformation she yearned for? It felt as if she stood at the edge of a precipice, drawn toward the abyss, yet terrified to take the plunge. As the rain drummed against the windows, she absently traced patterns on the table, lost in contemplation. The weight of Ethan's gaze lingered on her, urging her to look deeper. What was she afraid of? It wasn't just the fear of ridicule or judgment. It was the raw vulnerability that came with exposing her soul. Wasn't poetry, after all, an invitation to dismantle her carefully constructed facade? The truth devoured her thoughts like a ravenous fire. Her poems had always been a vessel for her bottled emotions, a hidden language of pain and reflection. Each word carried a part of her, each line a semblance of her truth. Why had she convinced herself they weren't worthy? Perhaps it was time to unearth her voice, to stand amidst the ashes of her past, and declare her right to create. Ethan's words echoed loudly. Who decides what's good enough? No longer merely idle questions. They resonated with a burgeoning resolve. In that moment, she realized her doubts had crafted an unyielding prison. What if she chose to dismantle the walls, to voice her tears, her triumphs, and her pain? Her hands trembled slightly as she deliberated over her next steps. Sharing her poetry felt like standing naked before the world. What if it was catastrophic? What if she stumbled through her own truths and could not bear the weight of her emotions when they escaped her lips? Still, the flicker of courage her conversation with Ethan burned brighter now. Determination coalesced within her. Perhaps those poems were not about showcasing perfection, but embracing authenticity, the nuanced shades of experience that demanded to be shared. Could she not transform her self-loathing into a source of strength? The paradox coursed through her. The very pain she wished to hide could also be the fabric through which she wove connection, that a sudden idea struck her a path to share her work without forsaking her comfort. The thought of starting with a private reading, just with Ethan, kindled a spark that fluttered in her chest. There was no pressure of an audience, no critical eyes to weigh her down. They could simply sit across from each other, laid bare by words that revealed and explored. But the very idea sent an icy shiver through her body, reminding her of her hesitation. What if Ethan, too, saw her differently after hearing the rawness of her experiences? Would his perception alter forever, or would it affirm her worth? She lifted her gaze to find Ethan still watching her with that inscrutable expression, concern mingling with hope. "You okay?" he asked, gently breaking the silence that filled the space between them. "Yeah, just thinking about sharing," she admitted, her voice trembling on the brink of something profound. About letting go. The way he leaned forward showed just how invested he was, encouraging her to take that leap. The rainstorm raged outside, mirroring the tempest within. It was time to make a choice to unfurl her truths and let them breathe. "Maybe I'll share one," she said, her voice steadier. "Just one." As she spoke, a wave of determination washed over her, settling a newfound resolve that had eluded her for too long. The pursuit of her dreams stretched out before her, glimmering with possibilities and caution. Whatever lay ahead, Sarah was ready to confront the ghosts of her past and rewrite her narrative. But would she truly have the courage to face the raw truth of her soul? A familiar anxiety clawed at her gut as she weighed the risk. What if the shadows weren't ready to fade? In revealing her heart, might she expose herself to wounds yet unattended? The air thick with anticipation, Sarah took a deep breath. This was her moment, a precipice upon which she would either leap or linger. With a pounding heart, she prepared to take that step into the unknown. Would her journey into vulnerability lead her closer to self-discovery or deeper into turmoil? Only time would unveil the answer. The clatter of dishes and the distant laughter of patrons faded into a blur as Sarah's heart raced louder than the surrounding din. She leaned back in the booth, feeling the cool leather against her skin, grounding her amidst the storm of emotions swirling within her. Just one poem. The thought unraveled in her mind, encouraging yet terrifying. What is it about? Ethan's question cut through her reverie, his eyes bright with curiosity. To share a single poem felt like revealing a secret handshake, known only to her. She searched for the right words, but found only silence intertwined with memories. Each poem she had written felt like a fragmented part of her, a quiet scream yearning to be affirmed. It's about the struggle of feeling unseen, you know? She hesitated, but continued, emboldened by her own admission. Like wandering through a crowd and feeling invisible, but still hoping someone might look past the surface. Ethan nodded, his expression softening. The understanding that passed between them was palpable. It sounds powerful. Powerful. The word echoed in her head, a seed taking root. What if she shifted her mindset? Instead of viewing her work as vulnerable exposure, what if it became a bridge, a way to connect, resonate, and heal? Even the thought of it sent warmth cascading through her. Her gaze drifted out the window, where raindrops created patterns against the glass, mirroring the lines of thought cascading in her mind. What if the fears she clutched onto were merely shadows, harmless until she allowed them to loom large? Are you ready? Ethan's voice pulled her back to the present, bringing her deeper into an awareness of the moment. The moment stretched, filled with unspoken words and a risk she yearned to take. She could almost hear her heart drumming a steady rhythm, urging her on like a coach pushing an athlete to the finish line. What if this revelation, this initiation into sharing her voice, could lift the fog that shrouded her dreams? Taking a breath, she summoned the courage she had cultivated since their conversation began. Okay, I'll read it, she decided, adrenaline coursing through her veins. But I want you to promise me something. Anything. No matter how bad it sounds, you'll just listen. No critique tonight. Scout's honor, he said with a grin that relaxed her. Sarah clasped her hands over the table, fighting the urge to bury her thoughts. With her heart pounding, she pulled a crumpled slip of paper from her coat pocket. It felt weighted with significance, alive with her unarticulated emotions. Here goes nothing, she murmured, the words feeling both archaic and fresh as she unfolded the paper. The words came tumbling out in fragments, raw and unrefined, each syllable brushing against her heart like wind weathering a stone. The poem spoke of anonymity, of battles fought silently, and the hope nestled within despair. As she recited her truth, the world outside the diner faded into insignificance. Ethan's presence transformed from mere company to a beacon that illuminated her vulnerable landscape. During pauses, she sneaked glances at him, reading his expressions, gauging responses she had long craved yet feared. As the last line left her lips, a suffocating silence followed. Sarah's throat tightened, panic threatening to upheave her calm facade. She had bared a piece of her soul, risking exposure to potential judgment. What if she had miscalculated? Ethan's gaze held her, unwavering. That was incredible. The sincere awe in his eyes thawed the ice within her. A cascade of relief swept through as she allowed herself to breathe, realizing in that moment that the act of creation reached beyond mere words. It opened pathways. Really? Absolutely, he affirmed, that ever-present warmth in his voice, mingled with an urgency to know more. What made you write that? Her thoughts recoiled slightly, the questions spilling into untouched corners of her mind. As she elaborated, peeling back layers she had kept hidden even from her own awareness, a tremor of lightness surged within her. She discovered that sharing her experience was not an act of weakness, but of profound strength, a revelation she hadn't known she yearned for. Each word released more than just her fears. It molded her identity anew, revealing a side of herself she scarcely recognized. But as both exhilaration and doubt intertwined, a familiar question surfaced, treading the thin line between excitement and vulnerability. Do you think anyone else would understand it? Ethan's response lingered in the air, heavy yet electrifying. I think they would relate more than you know. His words echoed profoundly within her, igniting a fire of ambition. Sarah had just stepped into a new realm of trust and creativity. But the lingering uncertainty unsettled her. Still, what if sharing her voice unveiled truths she wasn't ready to confront? With a newfound determination emerging, Sarah resolved to take another step beyond this private reading. Change was a mantra she could embody if she embraced her path of vulnerability, but was she ready to push the boundaries further to consider sharing with others? The thought nudged at her anxieties, hinting at the journey ahead, where the wall she had built might just need to come crashing down. And as she looked back at Ethan, a new question arrived, electrifying yet daunting. What if this was merely the beginning of her transformation, a prelude to even deeper self-discovery awaiting just beyond the curtain of the next chapter? The murmurs of the diner faded as Sarah felt a new force stirring within her. Words still echoed in her mind. I think they would relate more than you know. Ethan's encouragement wrapped around her like a warm blanket, promising a safety she had long denied herself. She hadn't just shared a poem. She had unveiled a part of her soul that had been suffocating in silence. Still riding the high from her performance, a flicker of doubt intruded. Was it enough? The world outside the diner seemed daunting now, each passing car whispering tales of potential rejection or understanding. What if exposing her words led to criticism rather than connection? At that moment, she could no longer deny that what she yearned for was more than the approval of one person. It was an irrevocable understanding of her existence through her art. Maybe I could, read at an open mic night? The very suggestion tumbled from her lips, shaky yet empowered by the thought's spontaneity. Ethan's eyebrows shot up, and he leaned in, intrigued. That's a bold step, a huge one, but I think you can do it. Have you thought about what you'd say? A wave of exhilaration washed over her. The thought of a stage was intimidating, yet ignited a sense of purpose. Suddenly, the fears felt almost trivial. She wasn't merely reading her poetry. She would be encapsulating the struggles that intertwined her life with others. Sharing that vulnerable part of herself could illuminate someone else's path, validate their experiences. I've never performed in front of anyone besides you, she admitted, the enormity of the idea flooding her senses. But you just did, Ethan pointed out, his tone carrying an incredulous hope. You read something so personal right here, and look at how it made you feel. Just imagine the impact it would have. His words were akin to a match striking against kindling. They ignited a small yet fervent flame. The room felt stifling for a moment, the air thick with anticipation. She envisioned the crowd, faces she wouldn't recognize, yet each one potentially carrying a story that echoed her journey. What lay ahead terrified her, yes, but it also presented a possibility, a horizon teeming with potential connection. Sarah leaned into the fear, nurturing it instead of pushing it away. Okay, I'll do it. The decision burst forth, resolute and undeniable. The conversation shifted as they delved into the logistics, local venues, sign-up times, and communities of artists. With each detail, Sarah felt the specter of doubt begin to dissipate. Anxiety morphed into anticipation. Visions of the spotlight didn't appear as monsters, but as gateways to understanding both herself and those who might be stirred by her words. Yet, as she scrolled through potential open mic nights on her phone, a constricting thought gripped her. Would her poems resonate with an audience that she didn't know? With people who didn't share her pain? The fear of vulnerability began to coil around her, once more a familiar, unwelcome guest. What if I stand up there and choke? What if I can't convey the emotions properly? Anxiety sat heavy on her chest, threatening to tether her once more. Just remember, Ethan spoke, steady and calm. Every artist started somewhere. The only error is not sharing. If their experiences resonate, if they connect with your words, that's your victory already. The sincerity in his voice cut through her doubts. Yes, the performance would be for the crowd, but more crucially, it had to be for her. A testament to growth and reflection, a reclamation of her voice after years of confinement. With resolve hardening in her chest, Sarah felt an insatiable curiosity blooming within. What would it feel like to share her truths with voices unknown? To peel back layers that had remained untouched for so long? As the moment stretched into contemplation, her fingers absent-mindedly traced the words on her paper. Each line bled vulnerability, strength, and discovery. Now it's time to create a piece specifically for it, she declared, excitement bubbling up. Each poem had been shaped by her experiences, but perhaps this one could become a lighthouse for others lost in their struggles. Ethan's approving nod spurred her on further. They spent the next hour sketching themes, questions, ideas. Each shared thought transformed her doubts into raw material, propelling her closer to that open mic stage. But as the plans unrolled before her, the clouds of uncertainty loomed in the background. Buried deep beneath her newfound determination was a forgotten hesitation, a fear that had kept her shackled. What if, After laying her soul bare, the audience offered nothing in return. The core fear of echoing silence at the end of a reading gripped her tighter, whispering doubts and possibilities she had wished to leave behind. In the recesses of her mind, she sensed that the true battle lay just ahead, confronting her worthiness, both as an artist and a person. Would she be brave enough to rise when the spotlight turned toward her, or would she retreat into the comfort of obscurity? The next step promised a challenging confrontation, but the outcome remained uncertain. What awaited her was the reflection of her courage, a test of resilience that could either shatter or redefine her understanding of self-worth. The sound of clinking silverware and the aroma of frying bacon lingered in the diner as Sarah stepped out, the frost of the early evening biting at her cheeks. Despite the chill, her heart pulsed with a mixture of fear and exhilaration, the decision to perform drawing her forward like a magnet. With each step on the cracked sidewalk, doubt began to shadow her spirit. What if she didn't have the right words? What if her trembling voice matched the vulnerability of her poems, cracking under the pressure? But amid the shadows, a flicker of empowerment ignited. She had committed to this journey. No longer could she hide behind the wall she had built. It was time to confront the silence that had become too familiar. Back at home, the familiar clutter of her room enveloped her as she sank into the worn armchair, a sanctuary in its own right. The vibrant pages of her poetry notebook beckoned, a reminder of the pieces that had evolved alongside her experiences. She flipped through them, allowing memories to wash over her, snippets of laughter, heartbreak, the struggles of trying to fit within a world that felt so foreign. Each line told a story, but now they demanded more. They yearned to be performed. Ethan's voice echoed in her mind, urging her to see beyond the fear. What if they connect? Every stifling barrier she had fought against began to crack, overwhelmed by the promise of authenticity. She realized this wasn't just about her. It was about the collective experience of being human, the shared weight of burdens and the healing power of words. Clearing her throat, Sarah took a deep breath and began to write anew. The pen glided across the paper as her thoughts twisted and turned, shaping and reshaping into something raw yet profound. Each line formed with intention, no longer merely reflections of her past, but beacons for what lay ahead. Writing became her lifeline, an exorcism of the fears that had haunted her. But as she crafted each stanza, a gnawing sensation reemerged. What if her truths didn't resonate? What if the audience felt alienated, spectators of a performance that felt too personal? A sense of urgency pushed against her chest, the palpable weight of her emotions clawing to be released. Focus on the connection, she whispered to herself, staring intently at the words forming before her. It's not just about you. That singular thought anchored her, reshaping her fears into motivation. Her journey towards the open mic wasn't merely an individual endeavor. It was an exploration of vulnerability, an invitation for others to navigate their own hidden battles alongside her. The night deepened outside, but Sarah was enveloped in a cocoon of creativity. Hours slipped by unnoticed as she wrote and rewrote until she felt the piece solidify into something meaningful. As she aligned the verses, a new question arose. How would she deliver them? Would the tremor of her voice echo her fear or showcase her truth? Practice became paramount. She shifted to the small mirror, the reflection staring back at her, both terrifying and empowering. With closed eyes, she recited the lines loud enough to feel their weight on her tongue, but soft enough to let the fear mingle with excitement. Each heartbeat is a revelation, she whispered, testing the tone she wished to convey. Every moment of silence is filled with potential. The words tasted foreign yet liberating, hinting at a revelation of strength that might not have existed just days prior. As the clock ticked toward midnight, the reality of her upcoming performance loomed large. Thoughts fragmented, excitement intermingled with trepidation. This was not just a recital. It was a moment of self-definition, a confrontation with fears that had gripped her too long. She visualized again the faces in that crowd, the strangers who might understand heartache, who might find solace in her words. Each imagined face became a reminder that vulnerability could forge connection. As the last of her hesitations began to melt away, she prepared for one final round of practice this time. She would imagine the stage beneath her feet and the spotlight illuminating her truth. Yet, even as she tucked her notebook into her bag, a new wave of anxiety hit, heavier than before. What if I lose my voice? What if I can't connect? She breathed, the questions heavy in her mind. In that moment, Sarah recognized the pivotal truth. Every fear she faced was a necessary part of her evolution, a stepping stone on the path toward authenticity. She would face those fears, not as shackles, but as tools to carve out her identity. And as she took that final breath before sleep, her heart raced not from fear but from the thrill that something profound awaited just beyond the horizon. The night held its breath, and so did she. What awaited her on that stage would either solidify or shatter her understanding of self-worth. Would she rise or retreat when a moment arrived? The morning light pierced through the curtains, casting a golden glow across Sarah's room, gentle yet insistent. It was the day of her performance. A tumultuous mix of anticipation and dread churned in her stomach as she lay still, grappling with the weight of the upcoming moment. Today would either mark the beginning of a new chapter in her life or reaffirm her deep-seated insecurities. Swinging her feet onto the floor, Sarah planted them firmly, grounding herself as if the act could somehow summon the courage she needed. Thoughts raced, intertwining echoes of her poems with reminders of her past failures. As she stood, a flicker of resolve ignited within her. She would not let fear dictate her destiny. With calculated steps, she moved through her morning routine, each action becoming a mantra of sorts, each brush of her hair or splash of water reaffirming her resolve. In the mirror, she focused not on frizzy hair or tired eyes, but rather on the fierce spirit breaching the surface. She recited lines from her poems, first under her breath, then louder until her voice wove through the air like threads of light breaking through the darkness. Yes, she made her way to the venue. The city bustled around her. Each pedestrian shared a momentary glance, but Sarah wished to connect deeper, to share what lay beneath her skin. What if, amidst the monotony of the daily grind, her words could illuminate the inner struggles each person bore silently? She arrived early, heart pounding like a small drum. The venue felt larger than life, the stage looming before her like a vast expanse of uncharted territory. Artists gathered, showcasing their talents. Laughter and applause twinkled like stars in the background noise. Yet, amidst the commotion, Sarah felt like a ghost, a whisper demanding a voice. As she stood in her corner, a friendly face approached her. It was Ethan. His presence was a reminder that she was not alone. Nervous? He asked, voice soft yet encouraging. Terribly, she admitted, the vulnerability in her response both refreshing and terrifying. Ethan nodded as if understanding, his own pulse racing with anticipation for her. Just remember, it's about connection. They want to feel what you feel, he said, clasping her shoulder reassuringly. It was simple advice, but it anchored her in the storms swirling inside. Moments turned into hours, and soon it was her turn. The MC called her name, and the packed room seemed to hush in unison, ready to witness her unveiling. A mix of terror and excitement coursed through her veins as she climbed the steps to the stage. Each heartbeat thudded in her ears. The spotlight pinned her like a butterfly on display, immediate, vulnerable, and alive. Yes, she grasped the microphone, her palms slick with sweat. The verses she had rehearsed a million times danced on the edge of her tongue. Then, she recalled Ethan's words and took a deep breath. It was not just about her. It was about sharing her truth. Every heartbeat is a revelation. She began finding her voice. With each word that flowed from her, she shed layers of anxious skin, her delivery becoming a direct line to the hearts in the audience. Faces shifted from confusion to recognition, nods of understanding punctuating her performance like a heartbeat co-synchronized with her own. but a pang of doubt struck as she saw a pair of skeptical eyes in the back row. What if her truth fell flat with them? For a brief moment, the old familiar chains threatened to tighten around her throat, choking her words, but then she pushed back, embracing the urge to confront her fear. This moment is filled with potential. She continued, letting the rhythm of her voice rise and fall, wrapping each stanza with emotion, igniting the spark of empathy with every revelation. As she reached the last lines of her poem, an unexpected rush of energy coursed through her. What had once been her prison transformed into a platform, her insecurities morphing into strength. The audience erupted into applause, a wave surging towards her, washing over every initial doubt. Yet, as she stepped off the stage, fresh questions filled her mind. Had they truly connected with her? Was it enough to speak her truth? She glanced back distractedly, wondering how much of herself she'd shared amidst the whirl of voices and faces. The anxiety that had tightened her chest began to morph into something electric anticipation for the next chapter of her burgeoning self-discovery. Standing in the crowd, she took a deep breath, ready to bask in whatever followed next. What awaited her, both in the feedback of the audience and within her own heart, was a new journey altogether, a far more profound revelation of self she hadn't anticipated. And there in that moment, she recognized that the real performance had just begun. As echoes of applause filled the room, Sarah felt the anchor of resolve deeper than before. She must now confront not only her audience, but also her own concept of success and connection. What did triumph truly look like? Would she risk vulnerability again, or retreat into the shadows she'd fought so hard to escape? Sarah stepped off the stage, the clapping still resonating in her ears like an echo of fleeting triumph. The warmth of the spotlight lingered on her skin, the exhilaration of sharing her words mingling with the uncertainty of what came next. She was unsure whether the applause had been a genuine reaction to her performance or merely a polite acknowledgement of her bravery. Each person in the crowd had their own struggles, yet they had witnessed hers for just a moment. The line between vulnerability and exposure began to blur. As adrenaline coursed through her, Sarah felt a rush of clarity. She had laid bare her innermost thoughts, casting aside the mask of pretense that had weighed her down. But what did it really mean to connect? Following Ethan's encouragement, she had pushed past the fear of judgment, feeling light yet burdened by the magnitude of her revelations. Had she offered others a glimpse into a shared experience, or merely opened a window to her own fragile world? The crowd buzzed with spirited discussions as she squeezed her way through, absorbing snippets of praise and critiques. In those fleeting moments of validation, words of encouragement acted like secret fuel. Yet here she was, just another face in the crowd of creative souls seeking purpose and recognition. Outside, the pulse of the city throbbed, a reminder that life continued at a relentless pace, indifferent to her personal journey. She spotted Ethan in the throng, a smile lighting his features as he approached her. "You were incredible," he beamed. His enthusiasm felt genuine, igniting the first flicker of self-acceptance within her. "Thanks," Sarah replied, but the weight of imposter syndrome loomed. "I just didn't know if I connected." Ethan studied her with an intensity that made her questions freeze in place. "You did. People felt something real, something raw. That's what makes it powerful. But I think you're still holding back." His words struck a chord, resonating in the hollow chamber of her self-doubt. "What do you mean?" she challenged, shaking her head to dispel uncertainty. The nerves from earlier had returned, gnawing at her gut just below the surface. "There are pieces of you still hiding. The stuff that scares you the most. I saw it on stage. You touched greatness but didn't fully dive into it," he encouraged, leaving her thoughts racing. What could possibly lurk beneath layers she had yet to confront? Self-reflection ignited a spark of resentment deep within. For years, she carefully picked pieces of herself to share, hiding vast territories of pain. It took courage to reveal even a fraction of her truth. What if fully exposing herself led to heartbreak? But wasn't that the essence of true artistry, to confront the darkness within for the sake of transformation? Every poem, every performance, carried fragments of her soul desperately seeking healing. The emergence of this inner conflict demanded attention. I poured out my heart, but what if I reveal too much? What if they don't want my ugly truth? She said, her voice quieter, trembling with the weight of potential rejection. Or what if that ugly truth is exactly what someone else needs to hear? Ethan countered, his earnestness confrontational yet comforting. You have to ask yourself what risks you're willing to take. Isn't that what growth is? He was challenging her to confront deeper fears. And for the first time in a long time, she allowed the possibility of vulnerability to settle like a comforting blanket. Was it fair to expect others to connect without offering them the rawest pieces of her experience? Her heartbeat quickened as ideas swirled around. What if she pushed further, pinned the unfiltered truths lying dormant within? What awaited her on that edge of fear was the potential for empowerment, not just for herself, but for others who battled their own demons. As thoughts tangled and untangled, she looked past the crowd, beyond immediate applause, searching for clarity. The world outside the venue buzzed with possible stories and connections, yet she still felt tethered to uncertainty. Courage had unfurled during her performance, but what would it take to maintain that momentum? Maybe it was time to take those pieces Ethan hinted at and weave them into something new in exploration of her raw experiences. But with that realization came the inevitable realization. To expose herself further was to risk heartbreak, and the prospect terrified her. Let us find that hidden truth together, Ethan said, snapping her from her spiral of thoughts. I'm not sure I'm ready, she said, considering instead taking a step back into safety. Every moment is a step forward, even if it feels scary, he said softly. Those fears shaped you, but they don't need to define you. In that moment, a glimmer of possibility illuminated the doubts. What if stepping into her truth was not only a gift to herself, but also to others who needed to see their own reflections in her story? As her heart thrummed with what felt like the beginning of a new journey, a single question crystallized in her mind. How much of herself would she dare to display? Each step felt weighted with potential, with the ghosts of the past urging her on. Would she take the plunge and bare her soul, or let fear hold her back once again? The time had come to decide whether she would continue to speak her truth or retreat into silence, leaving her artistry unexamined and raw. The next morning found Sarah engulfed in the chaos of her thoughts as sunlight streamed through her bedroom window, bathing the room in a golden hue. Each ray seemed to magnify her uncertainties, igniting her internal battle. How could she transform ephemeral moments of connection into something steadfast? The allure of rawness beckoned, yet she remained rooted in fear. As she sat at her desk, pages of blank paper sprawled before her, the pen trembled in her grip. The familiar comfort of avoidance loomed large, enticing her to retreat into the safety of unexpressed emotions. She was a master at that. Boxes of unshared drafts decorated her shelves like spectral reminders of all she had withheld. To uncap the pen now, to mold words from her hidden truths, felt terrifying yet exhilarating. She closed her eyes, breathing in deeply, allowing herself a moment to visualize the path ahead. Surrounded by the cacophony of the bustling city, she envisioned the shadows of her past creeping into her mind. The betrayals, the moments of self-doubt, the loneliness that often wrapped around her like a fog. Yet deep within that fog lay the ember of her creativity, pulsing with promise for rebirth. Can I really do this? She murmured aloud, breaking the silence. The reflection that met her gaze in the small mirror across the room seemed to contemplate her question back. She didn't know the answer just yet, but she felt an unmistakable shift within, beckoning her to at least attempt the leap. Sarah reached for her laptop. The screen glowed in response, a blank space waiting for the story of self-discovery to unfold. She hesitated again, then consciously pushed against the inertia. What would happen if she let herself write freely, without the tightening grip of self-censure? What if the words she offered reflected those ugly truths rather than disguising them? The haunting memories swirled, becoming poetic images in her mind. Little fragments, vivid yet painful: her mother's disappointed gaze when she chose art over law, the abysmal silence that followed her heartfelt poetry readings, and the familiar ache of longing for acceptance from her peers. She realized these were the crucibles that forged her voice, twisting in raw intensity, waiting to be woven into a narrative larger than her fear. With renewed determination, Sarah began typing, letting the unfurling words pour from the depths of her soul. She wanted to articulate the complexities of her experience, not just the happy endings that seemed to be the norm. She moved through the unfinished drafts, piecing together a mosaic of her struggles. Each keystroke felt like sloughing off an old skin, one muddied by society's expectations and her own self-limitations. As the hours flew by, she lost track of time, captivated by her own emerging voice. Creativity danced at her fingertips, transforming fragmented memories into cohesive, stark honesty. Yet, with each passage she wrote, old fears resurfaced, encumbering her progress like heavy chains. What if no one resonated with her stories? What if she stood alone in her truth, vulnerable and exposed? Not everyone will get it, she whispered, pausing to collect her thoughts. But maybe, just maybe, that's the point. That realization wrapped around her like an embrace. True connection required authenticity, even in the face of inevitable disagreement. Staring at the screen, she leaned back, allowing herself to consider the next step. Ethan's words echoed in her thoughts, pushing her forward. It was time to not just articulate her hidden experiences, but to find a way to showcase them: a public reading, perhaps. An opportunity to transform those words into something that could resonate deeper than applause. The thought excited and terrified her. What if she organized a gathering where others could share their truths too? That notion of connection rippled through her, a tentative but promising idea taking root. A community of shared struggles, all seeking their place in the world, just like her. Yet doubt still clawed at her. She was terrified of the vulnerability that lay ahead. The risk of misunderstanding loomed large, a formidable wall against her growing fire. But perhaps facing that fear was precisely what she needed to do. Would she take the next step and share her work, unfiltered and raw? Or would she allow apprehension to imprison her once more? The stakes were higher now, and the fear of failure began mingling with the thrill of potential triumph. The moment of decision was fast approaching, and Sarah grappled with the reality of putting her heart on the line again. Would she cultivate courage, ready to face both connection and rejection? It was time to decide. As Sarah stepped into her makeshift stage, a small gathering of kindred spirits filled the room, their faces vibrant with anticipation. The hum of chatter faded, replaced by the warmth of understanding that enveloped her, a stark contrast to the cold grip of fear she had battled for so long. She glanced at the familiar faces, including Ethan S., whose presence anchored her, reminding her of the journey they had traversed together. Today, she would not just read her work. She would reveal herself fully and honestly. The podium stood before her like a beacon, ready to illuminate her truth. She clutched her notebook, feeling the weight of the pages filled with her heart as reflections the poetry she had once feared sharing. A deep breath coursed through her, filling her with the resolve she had cultivated in recent weeks. No more hiding. It was time to conquer her fears. Each word she spoke represented a small rebellion against the confines of her past. As she began, the rhythm of her voice steadied her nerves. "This is about feeling invisible," she stated, her tone resonating with sincere conviction. The room fell silent, drawing in each breath with her as she continued to recite her poem, raw, unrefined, yet undeniably authentic. A wave of recognition washed over her. Her experience echoed in the subtle nods and sparkled eyes of her audience. In that sacred space, Sarah felt radiating electricity, not the anxiety that once paralyzed her, but a profound connection. She no longer stood alone. She had manifested a community. As she navigated through her narrative, each verse delivered sparked recognition, empathy, and understanding among those present. The thread of her vulnerability bridged the chasm of solitude she had once inhabited. When she finished, a moment of silence hung in the air before the applause erupted, a sound that rushed over her like a tidal wave. Euphoria swelled within as validation washed away the remnants of self-doubt. She had risked everything by revealing her soul, yet found herself celebrated rather than condemned. It was a metamorphosis she had scarcely believed possible. "Thank you," she breathed, her heart thrumming with gratitude. The applause morphed into an embrace, knitting her to the souls around her. She was met with smiles and encouraging affirmations. People shared their reactions, echoing how deeply her words had resonated with their journeys. As conversations swirled around her, she felt her confidence solidify. The previous night, she had set out to merely share her poetry, but she had achieved something far more significant. She had demonstrated her resilience, her growth, and her capacity to inspire others. Sarah no longer saw herself as merely the survivor of her past. She had transformed into a vessel of hope, guiding others trapped in their own struggles. Amidst the lively discussions, Ethan approached, pride radiating from his expression. "That was powerful," he affirmed, his eyes sincere as he searched hers for the reflection of newfound strength. "You really let go, and it was beautiful." A flush of warmth enveloped her. But this time, it was born of assurance rather than shame. "I realize now that my truth is worth sharing," she replied, her voice firm and unwavering. In the aftermath of her performance, Sarah felt a palpable shift, not just within herself, but in the energy of the entire room. The world felt lighter. She had conquered the weight of silence that had bound her for so long. Each heart she connected with meant she was not just a poet, but a storyteller holding space for shared human experiences. As the gathering came to a close, and she exchanged a final glance with Ethan, a new realization dawned. Her journey had only just begun. She had evolved from being a solitary dreamer to a true artist ready to delve deeper into her explorations of the human condition. It dawned on her that each reading would further refine her voice, and the community would grow, her art would flourish as she used every interaction as a platform to transform pain into poetry. Standing there, as the sun dipped below the horizon, she felt a profound sense of accomplishment surge through her. She had achieved a profound level of introspection, and with clarity shine in her soul, she knew that on this path of truth, there would be discomfort, but also inevitable growth. Today, she had conquered the shadows of her past and unearthed a power she had long underestimated. An artist, a poet, and now a beacon for others. These were not just identities she claimed, but truths she embodied. With that knowledge solidified deep within, Sarah felt empowered to step boldly into her future, inviting every heart to join her on this profound journey of realizing the untold strength found in vulnerability. Now, this is the moment for you. Subscribe immediately to the channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm. Comment your reactions and theories about the ending. Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this. Conclusion: you need to show your support now. Let us keep these heartfelt narratives alive. Don't wait even one more second to share.